Welcome to no, what's the name of the show? I forgot.
Eat
Eat
something
something sexy,
sexy.
which actually is your new book.
No is the name of my website.
It's a name. And you're on exclusively on malcolmpresents.com. And this is a new show, a new series that we're going to have. And I think it's a series about something that everybody, yeah, well, it's not really about, it is about sex in a way.
In the tastiest way.
But yeah, but it's the way how food affects the body, both emotionally and sexually. Because actually, there's a big connection between food and the way you feel and sex. There's some movies out there.
No, there are some great movies.
Yeah, what's the one with the chocolate?
Like Water for Chocolate.
Like Water for Chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and there's something so sensual about it. And I think I told you when I worked for KFAC, the radio station in Los Angeles, a lot of my clients were chef owners.
Right.
And their cooking, when I would come in the morning, to sell them or talk about commercials, when they were cooking, they were so much in love with what they were doing. There was a passion. There was almost a romance that they had with the food. I found this the same actually with musicians, with especially with was one musician that we had, a guy named Bill Miller. He was like 90 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He was the arranger for Frank Sinatra, and he was playing the piano, and the way he was tickling the keys, he was caressing it. He was making love to the keys.
Yes.
Then there was.
I was going to say both of those careers. I mean, first of all, they're both artistic, and frankly, they're hard jobs. Being a chef is a hard job, so you have to love it. And most chefs love it so much they want other people to love it, and so there is this sort of passion. It's this passion that they feel and they want other people to feel from their food.
How did you? Now, tell us your background, since this is the first show we're doing.
Yes. So I have my master's degree in gastronomy, which basically it's a Master of Arts in gastronomy. So it's the study of everything about food except cooking. It's the relationship between food and people, food and the arts and culture, and any way that food kind of touches our lives, other than practical of cooking it. Now, of course, I've done that too. All of my life. As a kid, I made dinner for my family. I was one of those people who always just wanted to be in the kitchen. And so I certainly, I have plenty of experience in cooking. I have very briefly dabbled, not that successfully, in cooking professionally. I mostly get thrown out of the kitchen. But I also have worked in the wine business. And the way that I came to aphrodisiacs, I've always loved mythology, but I've always had an interest in the nutrition side of food. And when I was doing my master's program, I kind of realized that aphrodisiacs was an area where the two converge. And it was just this interesting, fun challenge to learn more about both sides and how can we kind of meld them to make more sense of the whole topic. And I actually, through the master's program, you could kind of do a lot of self-directed study, a lot of self-directed specialization. I did my master's dissertation on the relationship between food and sex in American pop culture.
I'd like to get a copy of that.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know where it lives somewhere in an archive at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, but I have a copy.
Did you study in Paris, or did you how did you?
So the program that I did was through their main English-speaking campus, which is in South Australia. So I studied through. It was a project a cooperative between Le Cordon Bleu and the University of Adelaide in South Australia.
You're an international woman.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Where do you live now?
I live in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, you're my neighbor. I live in Sherman Oaks. I think you live in the other side of the hill, right?
That's right. I'm grateful not to be there right now, though. Can I say that? I hear everyone is melting.
Actually, it's not that bad today.
Oh, good.
But I know you're out at the beach, and that's where I want to be.
I know. Yes.
But I got lazy. I grew up in an area called Coney Island. That was a block. I was like about 2 blocks from the beach and a mile from the bay and the outlet. I was surrounded by water. So
Yeah.
I would wake up in the morning, go to the beach, do my swimming, come back home, have lunch, go back to the beach. And then there was a place, there was an area called Seagate, and I would play basketball and eat, and they had jukebox, so it was like dating, and girls would come, getting back to your subject, yeah. And to me, an aphrodisiac food was pizza. It actually still is.
I was wondering if you were going to bring up pizza when you started telling the story and then mentioned girls. I was like, is pizza going to come into this?
Yeah, I mean, pizza with when you get older, either a beer or a glass of wine. That was almost romantic.
Yeah. Well, there was a study in the 90s, and I'm trying to remember. Pizza was it was about the sense of food and arousal, and pizza was one of the things on there. I can't remember what they found about. It's not one that I normally talk about. The findings weren't as remarkable as some of the others, like a combination of cucumbers and Good and Plenty candies apparently turns women on. But pizza
wait, let me take notes.
Pizza was in there. And I do remember I went to talk with a psych class at a community college. And we were talking about, that scent and arousal study, and we're talking about foods that they, kind of what's a date food and what would turn you on. And they were all talking about pizza. Yeah. Yeah. So
it's amazing. Yeah. You talk about Good and Plenty. Good and Plenty was the candy that I ate when I was a kid that we went to the movies. When we went to the movies, I had Good and Plenty because that would last the longest.
Oh yeah, if you gave me a box of Good and Plenty, they would last all night because I'm not.
No, I would eat it, but you could, because basically what you do is you don't chew it. They have the outer layer, which is all sugar, which you suck off, and then you have I love the licorice, the black licorice inside. But I didn't know that was an aphrodisiac.
Well, only for women. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
if you took a date and bought her the Good and Plenty, you might be,
in for a good time. Well, it was a different time when I was a teenager. I mean, now, I watch the movies, some of the movies, and it's, it's not to criticize, our present morality, but now it's nothing for a woman to go on a date and sleep with a guy for the first date. And in my days, that didn't happen.
No.
You could get to be so far if the girl was really into you. But a lot of them, the morality was, no, I can't do that. This is our first date. So could you do it? And let's pretend it's our 10th date.
Yes. Can we go back to that before my children are teenagers, please?
Well, the whole thing that changed the whole morality of things were, the birth control pill for women.
Sure.
Because now there was nothing to prevent the woman for, so to speak, going all the way.
Right.
But because you weren't worried about becoming pregnant. You were just worried about being called a slut. But it's your own morality. And if you felt that was fine, it was fine. And to me, I have a whole theory which we'll probably get into further shows of what is sexual morality, and what should you do and what should you not do. But I'm always fascinated by aphrodisiacs, because of course as I got older, it was okay, let's go to seafood or oysters on a half shell. that was supposed to be the epitome.
Right. That's right.
What exactly are aphrodisiac foods?
Okay, so my answer is pretty complex. If you look at the FDA, they say it's a food that directly, raises sexual arousal, raises sexual hormone levels. And, according to that definition, no food has been proven to be that sort of magic bullet. There are foods that we know do help support sexual health. And so I look at those, and those foods, you know, a lot of these foods have a history of aphrodisiacs. And I should go back to, okay, so historically, before, you know, the FDA got into it, historically, foods that were thought of as aphrodisiac, these were foods that were embraced by multiple cultures in different parts of the world. And frequently you see the same foods repeated around the world very frequently. And not only that, but when you look at these cultures, we have to think right now, I know there are a lot of food insecure individuals in the world, but we do tend to have an abundance of food as compared to many of our predecessors. You know, these people were starving. And if they were sort of saving this food as something special and upholding it as almost medicinal, you know, there had to be something to it. And now if you look at nutritionally, a lot of these foods that were considered aphrodisiacs to previous cultures, we find that a lot of it is nutrition to support either sexual health, or your heart, and anything that supports your heart. It's all about blood flow, which is also extremely important to your sexual health. You can't have, you know, you can't, for men, it's a leading problem with erectile dysfunction is blood flow. For women, it's often a problem too. They, you know, it's a part of the reason a lot of women don't have sexual satisfaction. And so that, you know, frequently these foods were things that supported heart health and blood flow. Or sometimes they were simply foods that were an excellent source of protein, gave people the energy and they felt like they wanted to do this stuff. So, and then as we already touched on, some foods do have an immediate effect, like the scent of cucumbers and good and plenty candy turns women on.
That I hadn't heard before.
That turns people on, you know. So there are some foods with an immediate effect. There are some foods that may give you a better chance with a, you know, prospective lover. They may not. But you know, there's, and then like chili peppers. Chilies are one of my favorite aphrodisiacs to talk about because
Really?
of the fact they raise your body temperature. You're a little more ready to tear off your clothes. You know, it's a lot easier to get in the mood when you're like feeling warm, maybe a little tingly.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. Also, there's an you know, they irritate your lips a little bit. Your lips will plump up. Your cheeks may flush, which psychologically they say is said to replicate like a sexual flush to someone who's looking at you and maybe thinking about that kind of thing. So they can also, you know, if you eat enough chilies, you will have like a release of endorphins. I've never eaten enough chili to achieve that. I'm like chili scared. But for those who are like really into it, really want to go for it, you know, that kind of runner's high that you can get from chilies can kind of push things forward in the bedroom too.
Oh, well, it's funny.
You know, when you're feeling invincible and you're just ready to take on the world. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had an endorphin, you know, high from chilies, but in my former days, I've done some marathons, and in the training, there's a time where you know, you're running, you know, 5, 10, 15 miles, and all of a sudden, you know, you're tired, and all of a sudden, we call it, you know, the second wind, and all of a sudden you feel fine, and you can go on forever. And then I found out that's the endorphins being released, what we call the feel-good hormone.
Yep.
But I didn't realize that also had a sexual connotation. I think everything has a sexual connotation. Which, like,
if you really want to have sex, everything has a sexual connotation.
Yeah, well, I feel that you know, well, my theory after all these years is that's the nature. That's why, you know, procreation was what we're meant to be. Was you know, that's in our DNA, in our bodies. We're meant to procreate. And this is why we have, you know, all these feelings. It may not be love, it might not be have anything to do with emotion. It has to do with the pure physical need. And whoever nature put it into us, you know, I don't particularly say God put us into us, but nature put this into us.
Right.
And if you know, you know, which is kind of funny because men reach a sexual peak in their sort of mid-teens. Women don't. I mean, I might be wrong. You might could tell me different. In the mid-teens, but women don't hit their sexual peak till, you know, their late 20s, early 30s. So I wonder why this is why 30-year-old women are going with 18-year-old guys.
Well, women tend to live longer, so maybe that's we should be finding men 10 to 15 years younger.
Yeah,
the way that kind of culture has gone is maybe the opposite. It shouldn't be the men who are going for people, for mates that are far younger. It should be the women.
Yeah, but the women have, conversely, which is almost the antithesis, is your biological clock.
Right.
Gets harder, for you to conceive, a women to conceive after 30.
Right.
And for men, you hear men fathering children, into their 80s and 90s.
Yeah. Well, then we could all be Janet Jackson. Didn't she have a child was it 50 or 51?
Yeah, I think so. But then again,
she must be in really good shape.
But then again, I don't know what is, in today's day, what is natural childbirth and what is, doctor oriented,
Look, but she carried that child.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Well, you know what they say? They say that if men would give birth and have children, there wouldn't be a population explosion. Because, with me, I know I get a paper cut and I go to my wife, oh, look at the paper cut. It hurts. And she looks at me and says, what are you, crazy?
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've heard and the stories I hear and the TV shows about giving birth, oh my God.
I don't know. I gave birth without drugs, and I don't. It's all good. It's all good. I mean, I also wasn't one of those people who was in labor for 14 hours. I should add that. It was like a 2-hour labor.
Well, my first child, I have one son that's 26. And I guess at the time my wife was 29, 30 when she gave birth. And she's from El Salvador, and there's some sort of herb that she takes. I don't know. It's a natural herb that they're supposed to take with a tea, and it says it helps labor. So the first one was a long time. It was 2 hours and I think 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Second son was 19 months later. And when we got to the hospital, the nurse says, and I was prepared to wait. The nurse says, okay, she's 9 centimeters dilated, bring her to the delivery room. And I got to the delivery room, and all of a sudden I hear the nurse says, push. I said, not yet, I don't have my camera set up.
Well, I had a situation with my second child where it was very fast as well. They had told the doctor everything was fine, and he should go take a nap, and they'd call him. I looked at the nurse a little while later, and I was like, I gotta push.
No way.
I had to tell the doctor there was a net situation because they weren't sure the doctor was gonna be able to catch the baby. This is where aphrodisiacs get you. This is the kind of trouble aphrodisiacs get you into.
Oh, I got to hear the beginning of that story. How you got? No, we won't talk about how you got that way.
Actually, I do love to tell the story of my first cookbook came out in, I think it was 2006.
What was the name of that?
Called Fork Me, Spoon Me. Mm-hmm. And my now husband was a friend of mine, and I knew he was a bachelor. He lived alone. He didn't know how to cook. He lived on takeout and cans of soup. And when you are testing recipes for a cookbook, like you have to make the same food over and over. I had a lot of food around, so I just kept calling him and inviting him over. Would you like some food? Would you like to come over for dinner? And he kept coming over for dinner. I was just being nice. Well, now we're married. What? And let's see, my second book, Romancing the Stove, that book came out a couple of months before my son was born. So you can see what happened there. So, yeah.
Well, the fastest
recipes obviously work.
Yeah. Well, they say the fastest way to a man's heart is through his stomach.
Exactly.
And
I wasn't trying to pick him up either. It was, it just happened naturally over all of those meals. It really did. And then, my son, hey,
fantastic.
I have a child, write an aphrodisiac cookbook, apparently.
How did you get interested in aphrodisiacs in the first place? I don't know if we covered that.
So I just mentioned briefly, so I always liked mythology. And so a lot of like Western aphrodisiacs, of course, the word aphrodisiac is for the Greek goddess Aphrodite, and,
Yeah.
and the majority of foods we consider aphrodisiac in Western culture, it came from the, the ancient Greeks. And so I really enjoyed learning about that. I also had an interest in the nutrition side of food, but I didn't want to become a dietitian. I didn't want, I didn't want to go to school for nutrition, to be honest.
Mm.
And this was a way that I could explore that. I could explore both of those things, really. And it took me into many other things beyond, but but the topic of aphrodisiacs, I realized quite quickly, allowed me to explore, history and folklore and mythology of food, as well as the nutrition side of food. And then of course it touches a lot on food and culture, which is so interesting. And then I got to kind of dive into the Eastern side, and that's a whole other world. I mean, that's sort of part of their medicine. And I just, anyway, it's all just fascinated me so much. And when I started looking at this topic, there wasn't a lot of information from a food standpoint. It was mostly, there was some science stuff. It was mostly anthropological. And I really enjoyed the challenge of learning more and discovering more and kind of putting together the findings from, the science side and reading these academic papers, and then reading more about the folklore as well. And, not just Greek mythology, but there's some South American folklore. And when my trip to Southeast Asia was quite inspiring as well. And so, all of these things just were so fascinating to me, and I just continued to go further and further into the topic.
That's interesting. And speaking of the champagne and wine, what does this do to the psyche?
Oh, wine is aphrodisiac for sure. As I mentioned, I have worked in the wine industry, and I also do currently work as a wine writer. So I am going to unfairly, I may be pushing a little hard on the wine. Everyone should drink wine because you'll get lucky. But wine absolutely is considered an aphrodisiac. And we touched on the whole heart health thing. So of course, a lot of people turn to red wine as their aphrodisiac because, it's red and it's kind of lusty, and as well as the fact that we have all of these ties to heart health. The interesting thing is that a lot of champagnes and sparkling wines have very similar health benefits, which is what I'm drinking right now, by the way. I'm that's not true. I'm drinking a Prosecco right now, which is made from white grapes. But since a lot of champagnes and sparkling wines have red grapes in them, they see a lot of the same heart health benefits, but also champagne has some interesting brain health benefits. And I always say that, the smart together lover is the best lover, right? So I'm always up for a glass of bubbles as a part of a romantic evening. Or Friday night.
How to keep your husband happy?
Actually, my husband hates champagne.
You hate champagne?
But I have no problem drinking it alone.
Oh, you can have
when I drink it.
you can have the bottle. You don't need his help.
That's right.
Yeah, but I find out again through my, just living that people. I mean, one of the reasons I think that people have a difficult time, being married and wind up getting divorced, is that the reason they get married is they think they're in love. But the problem with that is they're not necessarily in love, they're in lust. They see somebody that, oh my God, drop dead gorgeous, whether they have them with pizza or, by oysters, and the sex is dynamite. And obviously, okay, that's it. We're going to get married. And then a year or two later, they realize they have nothing in common. They don't, they don't like each other. They don't like each other's habits. They don't like who they are. So they really got married because they thought they were in love, but that's not love. As I say, that's lust.
That's the champagne.
That's a champagne talking. There is
actually, interestingly, champagne could get you in trouble, or red wine, in that Wines, the sense of some wines, according to the research of Dr. Max Lake, who was an Australian physician as well as a vintner, he discovered that the sense of wines replicated the sense of human pheromones, which are those, attraction sensors, the olfactory attraction sensors that we don't realize they're happening. We don't recognize them on a conscious level, but in the scent of wine, frequently you will find pheromonal scents.
Interesting. Yeah, I one time private label. There was a friend of mine worked for a place called Doc Johnson.
Okay.
Doc Johnson made rubber toys.
Yes.
They were the largest maker of toys. And he used to do shrink wrapping. His company did shrink wrapping.
Gotcha.
And they had a cologne that supposedly had pheromones. and they sold it like for $5 a bottle.
Oh my. What did it really smell like?
It was horrible. But for a year or two, what I was doing is I was buying them from Doc Johnson, private labeling them. And the name I had was Raw, R-A-W.
Oh my gosh.
And I was private labeling them and selling over radio stations to TV stations. And it worked out well.
I should be in, man. That's great.
But well, it's funny because sensibility, like smell, odor, like you have to like the way a person sweats. When you're, because I mean, I've had enough experience that when I've, with a woman, you're making love and all of a sudden, no, I don't like their odor. And that turns people off. And there are other ones that you go crazy about.
Right. Well, they've done experiments like handing women the dirty t-shirts of men, and they would discover which man the women were attracted to, by the dirty t-shirts.
Yeah. I mean, because it's all our senses come into play. Yeah. The sense of course, the sight, a beautiful woman, but also I find it's also a matter of attitude.
Mm-hmm.
But we're getting a little far off the topic, which I enjoy. We can have a show just based on romance.
Romance is important.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Can you? If someone has a date, and he feeds her all these aphrodisiacs, could that take the place of her really not liking him?
To a degree.
Could it be just physical?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree. It's never, it's never going to, like, if he has halitosis and is a bad conversationalist, it's never gonna it's never gonna be the one thing that convinces her the right meal. But yeah, to a degree, and it could also be partially be the presentation. It could be the fact that he went to the lengths to choose these foods and cook it for her. One of the important things I say is preparing the aphrodisiacs, or choosing, if you're not preparing them because maybe you're ordering in or whatever it is, choosing the aphrodisiacs that the other person enjoys.
Mm-hmm.
If I gave my husband oysters and champagne, he would just be like,
you gotta be,
I'll be watching TV now. Bye.
You'll still be a virgin.
Yeah, I would have no children. No. But yeah, to a degree, it certainly it can keep romance alive. It can set that tone. Yeah, it's definitely a part of it.
Yeah. Well, I find out an important thing also with the food is what's called ambiance.
Right.
It has to be. That's why expensive restaurants are good. The gourmet restaurants. I think they make that thing more of ambiance. It sets the right mood versus just being alone, home in the kitchen. But then again, a kitchen might be just an ideal spot.
Oh, a kitchen is a sexy place.
And put on, in my youth, they said that Johnny Mathis impregnated more women than anybody else, because you put a Johnny Mathis album on, which is all slow tunes, and you look at each other in the eyes, and you do slow dancing, and that's it.
Barry White. I've actually asked a few people who are in the romance field. Barry White is the name that comes up these
Barry
days.
White.
Barry White.
And I think prior to me was Frank Sinatra. That's where a lot of the women say, "Oh, Sinatra," and they swoon just thinking about him, and that puts them in the right mood.
Yeah.
And I remember in my single days. I'm from Manhattan. Well, I'm from Brooklyn, but I lived in Manhattan after I graduated college. Yeah, I was going into a bar, with a glass of scotch in one hand, a cigarette in the other hand. I was cool. But what was funny, it's how women interpret, what you're doing. And I was shy, believe it or not. I was shy. I'd go into a bar and go to the corner, where I could view everything and have my scotch and my cigarette, Marlboro, of course, because I didn't have a tattoo, but I was a cowboy at heart. If you remember the ads, the guy in the horse and bum 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 bum. But anyway, and then sort of like if either approach a woman or she'd come over to me, they said, "You were so stuck up when you came in." Yeah, they thought I was looking down on them, which in essence was good. But they said, "You were stuck up. You thought that all other women would flock to you," and I was shy. But this should be a fun show, because I wanted to. You said you have people that you are going to guests that come on the show. I think we should do the show just me and you alone.
We easily could. Maybe every other. But I have some people who have unique perspectives on different aspects of what is an aphrodisiac, or not just what's an aphrodisiac, but getting that women lose that mojo at a certain age. Men have issues with, especially when they have issues with heart health, issues with sexual health as well. And even for those, and for people who are shy, there are other things like, okay, well, so next week I'm hoping to have an expert on spirits who also happens to write for Eat Something Sexy, the blog. And so hopefully she's going to come and talk about sexy cocktails and how you can set the tone with a sexy drink. And hey, which spirits are the most sexy and why, and all of those, so there's so much that can be covered.
Apply them with alcohol.
Apply with alcohol, but make it the right one.
Yeah, you're right. Not to get them drunk. Did you hear that little beeper?
That's us. We're done.
It's a half hour is up. But just one funny story. You're talking about. I don't know if you were talking about, but blood flow and age, and this complex that I'm living in now in Sherman Oaks, Harside Estates. It's been known for having elderly folks initially when I first got in here. And there was a group coming down from Florida, around the Miami area, and they were they wanted to do a commercial for the senior citizens living there. And what it was is that STD, sexually transmitted diseases, was becoming large in senior complexes. And why? Because the men who couldn't perform in their 60s, 70s, and 80s now were popping Viagra. And the women who, also wanted to, whether it be physically or emotionally, needed to be, I call the word, serviced.
Right. I actually have heard a similar story about a senior living facility in Beverly Hills. Yeah.
Yeah. Now just a little joke and we'll end it, about the guy that went to the doctor. He was about 60 years old, and he goes to the doctor and says, "Doc, could you give me a physical? I can't perform anymore." "Well, what's wrong?" "Well, I don't get excited. I can't get an erection." So the doctor gives him a physical and he says, "Jack, everything is fine with you. It's all in your head." And he says, "Doc, I know it's in my head. Could you lower it down a little bit?" You're not laughing.
That's hard with that one. I don't know.
That's a joke you can tell the mixed company.
Yeah.
Anyway, Amy, I'm looking forward to our future shows together. It could be lots of fun.
I'm looking forward to it. For sure.
And do me a favor, again, we advertise through the social media, the social network. Email your friends that you're on malcolmpresents.com.
Yep.
And the show is, what's the name of the
Eat
show?
something sexy.
Eat something sexy. It has to be a winner. You have a great week, and I'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks.
Bye-bye.